everyone. Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. Organizations have begun to look at their internal practices and ask themselves, how are we practicing equity? Some nonprofits are examining their entire organization and making massive changes, which is okay, but that can be really overwhelming. Other organizations are doing it step by step. And then there are some that don't know where to begin because this idea of ensuring that you are practicing equity can be overwhelming. But I'll tell you something, one place to start is in the beginning. When your potential employee applies to be a part of your organization, that is where you begin. What are your recruitment processes? Are they equitable? Are you a welcoming organization? And how do you live out your value on equity? Well, grab yourself a cup of coffee and hang out with us for the next 30 minutes as we explore these issues.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee Time with Masterminds. My name is Peta Blakely, and I'm the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I am Cynthia Rojas, founder and principal of To Your Growth.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I'm Rebecca Tuttle, founder and principal of Grant Right Now and Grant Writing for Good.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I am Cynthia Rojas, and I am being joined by my co-host, Peta Blakely. Peta, where are you?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Oh my God, Peta, I had all kinds of technical issues going on in the background, and I was thinking, if our viewers and listeners could see me.
Can see what goes on underneath.
Yeah, they would laugh. They would really laugh. But we also want to welcome our listeners both in the US, Australia, and around the world. So if you're watching us and are joining us, put your name and where you're from in the chat. We always want to hear where our listeners are coming from. Thank you so much. So, Peta, we are continuing our conversation on equity. So far, we've talked about pay equity, and we did an entire show on what equity means. And today we're talking about equitable recruitment processes. So let's frame the conversation. Peta, what is equity and why is it important?
Mm-hmm. And why do we use the term equity as opposed to equality?
Yes.
Yeah. So why is it important? Because it's the right thing to do, right? It's the just thing to do. And also because it's better for your organization. Yeah. And I tend to sort of like shudder when people make the business case for doing the morally correct thing to do. But in the mission-based world, no, really, the people who are closer to the work, who know the community, right, who have lived experience are going to do it better, right? There's no question about that. So what is equity? It's making deliberate choices in how you run your organization to ensure that people from different backgrounds are not just invited to participate, but their participation is honored and cultivated in the organization.
I love the word honored. Yeah. And so there is research that says the more diverse groups tend to be more innovative, have different perspectives, probably make less errors. I mean, we see the big companies doing advertisements and having to pull them because they just messed up.
They messed up. Yeah. Yep.
So it is important. It is. And there is research that backs that up. So let's start with us, right? Because we are women. We're women of color. And so I'm curious, Peta, have you ever worked for an organization that did not practice equitable recruitment strategies?
Yes, of course. Most of them. And you don't really notice until are working in an organization that's more equitable. And there's, I don't think there's any such thing as perfectly equitable.
Yeah.
But some of the practices that are definitely not equitable are, not posting the salary band. Right? Let's start there.
We talked about that last week. Yes.
Yeah, so bad. Requiring degrees for positions that don't really need a degree, right? Focusing on the degree rather than the skills. Having expectations about professional appearance, right? And things like that create higher burdens for people who might look non-white or non-gender conforming or something like that. Really rigid attendance schedules where it's not called for. Now, obviously, if you're a nurse, you need to be there when people expect you to be there. But if you're an office worker, there's no reason for there to be like no flexibility about working from home and things like that. So, those are all ways that like different voices are just going to get not included in the conversation.
Yeah. Have you been with an organization that did practice equitable strategies?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. Like the salary band is like clearly discussed, right? There were no surprises, and there was really no advantage to being a good negotiator. As an evaluator, negotiation isn't part of my job. And so it shouldn't have been part of how I got paid. The organization had multiple rounds of interviews from different levels of the organization. So I met with people who'd be more senior than me and also people who would be more junior than me. The organization had policies like generally aligning their holiday schedule with the local public school district to make it easier for parents so that they were off when their kids were off, allowing people to work from home, allowing people to work 4-day work weeks, things like that. So having people bring their kids, at 3:00, a whole lot of kids would show up at the office and just hang out there till 5:00, right? Yeah. So in all these little ways, the organization is saying like, the real people who are in this community should be represented in this office.
I love that. I love this idea of building holidays around the school schedule because it's such a burden for families. And primary caretakers tend to be female. And we all know that in the workplace, females tend to suffer for that.
Yeah.
They do. Either there's backlash, or they miss promotions, or they miss raises, or they just miss being viewed as a professional because they're constantly having to balance work and family.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a problematic term, professional, right? I mean, it was defined without any of us in the room. So.
Yeah. I love that. Well, I had a organization. I had worked for an organization a very long time ago that I learned had not very equitable recruitment processes. And one time I was talking to the director of HR, whom I really liked and saw as a mentor, really knowledgeable individual who always wanted to impart their knowledge. And one day it came out in a conversation. Now, this individual loved the English language and loved grammar and was always very focused, was always really good at sharing like things that they learned. And English is a really difficult language to master. And so it once came out in a conversation that when people submitted resumes, if they had grammatical errors, he tossed them.
Yeah.
They did not even consider the resumes. And this was so counter to where the organization was going, because the organization was looking to hire individuals with lived experience. They were looking to hire bilingual individuals who speak multiple languages. And it's very hard. if English is not your native language, to master it. Hey, it's hard for people who do speak English and it's their native language.
It's a great example of this. Someone who is a copywriter and posted on LinkedIn this comparison between having a typo on your resume and like checking into a hotel and seeing a hair on the bed. And I said, these aren't exactly the same. These are completely different things. The person who cleans hotel rooms is a professional hotel room cleaner, right? Yeah. The person who writes resumes is not a professional resume writer. They're a professional something else. And we should not be privileging the people who can hire professional resume writers or hire copy editors to look over their resume when the job is not resume writing, right?
Yes, yes. And if you've ever looked for a job, you're constantly updating your resume for that particular position. So hiring an editor to review every single resume that goes out could be challenging. So you're right. And so we have to watch out for these things. Now, in researching for this show, I found an organization, nonprofit organization, that took on the journey of embedding equitable recruitment practices starting back in 2017. It's the American Alliance of Museums. And so this is interesting. They have a staff of about 40 people. And they still believe that they're in their journey, but they've written articles about it. And so there's a lot of research. And I thought the use of really practical advice would be helpful for the show versus, talking about what many people have done. I'd rather focus on one organization. So let's put up some slides. I like slides. All right. So recommendation number one, if you're considering equitable anything in your organization, it begins with your mindset.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complete approach. Practices in isolation aren't going to make any difference if there's not a real intent behind the whole thing. And this is not a simple procedural issue to address, right? This is a cultural issue and a belief system that is so embedded, right? And this is something that I've been thinking about recently because I've been working on a paper on why it's important to think about racial equity when you're doing data visualizations, right? And the status quo has been repeated, right? Millions and millions and millions and millions of times for hundreds and hundreds of years. So you're going to have to be really deliberate, right? You're going to have to really think through and unwind all of that programming in making this choice, right? Making one little tweak like, okay, we will not automatically throw away resumes that have typos in them. Right. It's not going to change the entire culture in your organization.
Right.
Yeah.
You're so right. Yeah. And that it really is a shift in what you think and
what you are deciding to value, right?
Yeah.
What you're saying is important.
Now, when I had a chance to lead an HR team and years ago, and one of the things that I made my mantra is that recruitment started from the minute that we were thinking about the job, thinking of building this new role or updating an existing job description, all the way through the first 6 months of that person's time with the organization.
That's a great way to think about it.
Which means, that we built in a lot of practices to ensure that we were welcoming, to ensure that this individual got the training that they needed. Like there's so much. So the change in philosophy in that department that we were there for your first 6 months really then helped us develop processes to that end and really support the individual. So
to understand what some of the hurdles and obstacles are,
right.
Come in.
Exactly. And not wait.
Yeah. I mean, I would say one of my last job was probably one of the least equitable places I've worked. And it was the opposite. Like I was there, they gave me my office and that was it. Kind of never heard from them again.
It happens a lot. It
Yeah.
happens a lot. I learned things like there were some departments that the manager did not think about cleaning out the desk and sanitizing it. And this is
Yeah.
pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And so this new employee walks in and the desk is a mess.
Yeah.
Now, nobody comes to work their first day to clean. So
Right.
just really pay attention to the entire journey, right? So, all right, the next one, evaluate your existing practices. And so I thought this was really great advice. And the American Alliance of Museums really challenges people to ask yourselves when you hear words like that candidate would be a great fit, or they would fit into our workplace culture, or they're the right fit.
Right.
They were more polished than others, right?
Yeah.
Oh, they can hit the ground running, right? These are limiting thoughts in the journey for equity. Do you agree, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, ways of saying like these people are like us and make us very comfortable because they're like us. Right?
Yeah. And, one of the things that was discussed in they've written a lot about this is this idea of if you're going to hire someone because they've had a similar job and you don't have to train them, and so they can hit the ground running. Well, the group of people that you can recruit or that you can choose from is going to be this small.
And it's going to be based on the equity initiatives of some other organization.
Yes.
If this is important to you, are you willing to let somebody else control it?
Yes. So there was a lot of conversation about training. So that's going to come back in another slide. But I thought that was really good advice. And really, she talks about bringing your hiring managers, whatever your structure is, and really asking, what do you mean when you say that person would be the right fit?
Yeah.
And really giving space, a safe space. We talked about psychological safety last week, but really allowing for a safe space for people to have these conversations. Because they're hurt. We've all gone through them, though. We've all gone through them. So you want to be careful. Like I tend, when I interview, I tend to want the potential candidate to be relaxed. So I have, informal conversation because I really try to relax them. I want to see them in their most natural state. But what then happens is that I find out I have a lot in common with this individual, and we start having conversation, and all of a sudden I'm liking them. Well, you need to be careful about that, right? Because again, you're reducing your pool, right? And you're not. What we want is to expand that pool. Yeah. So, what other advice does the American Alliance of Museums tell us? Oh, I love this one. Avoiding the urgency trap. We've all been there. Somebody leaves, they are direct service, and oh my, the clients keep coming. They keep coming, and you have no one to serve them. And so now we have to hire someone, right?
Well, this brings you back to hiring somebody who can hit the ground running.
Yes. Yeah. And that doesn't create a learning culture, and it doesn't allow you to look at other competencies, right? So you might be missing some things that another individual can bring. So let's think about this, because I really like this one. Avoiding the urgency trap.
And my background is in workforce development, and employers of all sorts have been providing less and less and less internal workforce development over the last, I'd say, since the 1990s, right? So the situation that you're in, that somebody has left the organization and you're going to hire somebody new from outside the organization, is somewhat self-created. right? If there is no pipeline in your organization to take more junior people and advance them into that role, if you're not offering any training that takes a more junior person and makes them able to take on this role after you know, send them away to a 2-week intensive, that's on you, in my opinion. You have been gradually creating this problem over the last 20 years.
Yes, yes. Another thing I thought about is when we start really focusing on wanting someone that can hit the ground running, they tend to have more experience. And
Yeah.
so we should examine that, right? Where did they get this experience from? There are people who have generations and generations of family members that have been in the sector and they have big networks and they can bring their child into their network and build this enormous and beautiful resume. And then there are some people whose parents came from a different country and they don't have that network. So the experience is not, they don't have as much experience as the next person. It doesn't mean they're not competent though.
No, I've been working on an evaluation project that has to do with a youth jobs program, and there are some hurdles. There's some paperwork. There's an application process for the young people to get into the jobs, and these are 15-year-olds, right? And there is some evidence that more economically well-to-do families support their kids better, right, to get into these jobs. And so these are like the first lines on young people's resumes, but white kids and higher socioeconomic status kids are getting the better jobs, which means at 15, we're starting to build a resume that's going to be a little bit behind for some kids and a little bit better for other kids. So, you know, even if you're hiring young people right out of college at 22, right? They've got 7 years of inequality already baked into their resumes, right?
Yes.
You're really going to have to think hard and be deliberate about how you overlook some of those things, consider some of that adversity as an advantage to taking a job, right? How
Yeah.
you are going to not privilege the kids who got the hardest to get internships in high school if you really want to have an equitable hiring process.
Yeah. I have a friend who her son is still trying to figure out what college, what major, what kinds of things. Oh my God, it's so much pressure. I don't miss those days. And he doesn't know what he wants to do.
Yeah.
I totally understand. And so
Do we know?
I'm still trying to figure it out. And so I'm talking to his parents, and finally, the dad says, "Well, our neighbor is a corporate lawyer, and he wants to intern with him during the summer to see what that experience is like." And I'm thinking, wow,
Right.
that's beautiful. I didn't meet a corporate lawyer until I was about 45.
Right.
I didn't have a neighbor who was a corporate lawyer that I could intern with. But
Yep.
these are the things that we have to consider. So that young kid, if he takes this opportunity, by the time he figures out college and he graduates, can you imagine the experiences he would have already had? That's amazing. So we want to be careful about that. We really, really do. All right, let's look at the next one. Temporary help as temporary learning assistance. This is interesting. The advice is to, if you're hiring and you want to slow it down, right, to hire temporary individuals in the role so that you can take care of the work and make sure that the work gets done, especially if you're working with individuals. But it also gives space for other employees to learn. And perhaps, like you had mentioned, Peter, you start to create pipelines. And they talked about moving away from this idea of temporary help and thinking of it as a temporary learning assistance, right? Where you bring someone from the outside to handle the day-to-day tasks, right? But you start to build capacity of the team, and you really start to think about that role in the context of a department. Does the role need to change? Does the department need to look differently? Like, this is the time to do it. So really
Yeah.
avoiding that haste that we
Yeah,
tend.
there's a tendency to, look at that person who's left and try to hire somebody else to do exactly what they did and how they did it. But
Yeah.
sometimes it's really an opportunity to reimagine the role, divide it into separate jobs, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, if you're really interested in this topic, you want to Google American Alliance of Museums and check out the articles. They've given such great advice. This is really, really high level. And we only have about 4 minutes left, but I do want to end with this one and asking yourself, are you a welcoming organization?
Yeah.
Right? So the recruiting process is usually very tactical, right? There's a lot to do. Looking at your job description. By the way, there is software that will analyze how equitable your job descriptions are. They use AI around language, right? So there's some words that appeal more toward women versus men, right? And so really making sure that you're not biasing your job descriptions. I thought that was very interesting. So there is help out there. But are you a welcoming organization? It doesn't end with the recruitment. So let's say
Right.
you now have a diverse staff. So let's say you're a staff of 10, you have hired someone that is in a wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
You have hired someone where English is not their first language. Or let's say you hired two people where English is not their first language, and you hired an older individual that doesn't have great computer skills. How do you welcome that?
Yeah.
What do you need to do? And these are the questions that organizations should ask themselves.
And how do you create a culture where it's like it's okay to ask your coworker for help on something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And not be seen as unprofessional or incompetent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is where, and you've been such a cheerleader with staff surveys. These kinds of issues get lifted often.
Yeah.
Because sometimes if there's no psychological safety, your staff are not going to tell you. But if you create that space, a staff survey would tell you if you are a welcoming organization. Again, it's a shift in the philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Really internalizing your values. I'll tell you a quick story. I worked with an organization highly diverse. Highly. They prided themselves in diversity. They did a staff survey, and individuals who had accents reported that they don't get a chance to speak in meetings. They get cut off, and their ideas are not valued, and they believed it was because of their accent. Now, if you walked into this organization, you would think, wow, they got the equity thing down pat.
Yeah.
But there was little nuances there. So we want to be careful. We're going to have individuals, again, with accents that you really have to listen. And we talked about this last week.
Yeah, right.
Really listen to what is being said and not how.
Yep.
You need to embed that in your values.
Yeah, I mean, and that is a real cultural shift, right? I mean, that's going to take how you do a whole lot of things and say, how can we organize this so that we don't privilege the people who talk fastest, or right?
Yes. Yes. Or the smartest. I worked at an organization where there was a person really, really wicked smart, talked really fast.
Yeah.
Right? And they ruled. No one debated
You
it.
get a word in edgewise. Yeah.
I would be amazed. Like, no, because you didn't dare, because this person was so smart that they could debate almost anything.
Right.
Like, nobody wanted, to be outed.
Right.
And, I would know if she walked into a room and was part of a meeting, I would know that we were going to end with whatever she wanted.
Whatever she said.
The debate. Yeah. That's inequity.
Yeah, I'm working on a group right now that is, they're being very, very thoughtful about how they make decisions on their team and want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to contribute, even though they've deliberately pulled together a team with very, very different expertise, right? So any item that's being talked about is in somebody's wheelhouse and definitely not in somebody else's wheelhouse, right? And one of the things that they've talked about is labeling parts of the conversation about whether it's idea generation time or decision time.
Oh,
Yeah, so people understand, there's no competition, there's no rush, nothing's going to get decided right now. We're all just going to generate ideas, and it's okay to stop this agenda item just because we get to a point in the clock and take those ideas without deciding anything, versus other times when the facilitator says, look, we've got to decide, are we doing activity A or activity B? And then we're only on decision time, right?
yeah.
And that's a very, very helpful way to support people to engage in different ways at their comfort level.
Yeah. Peter, I was thinking as you were saying that, I think we should do a show on how Zoom is either promoting more equity or not. And this is from what you said, right?
Yeah, I mean, Zoom is so powerful. One of
Yeah.
the things that's happening in this meeting is that people are communicating like 3 or 4 different ways at the same time, right? Because there is the, talking within the screen. There's also the comments. There's also a PowerPoint or like a Google Doc that everybody's sharing. And so people are typing in there. There's people's body language and faces and bodies because it is Zoom and they can see each other, right? So all of these different ways are, and because of the kind of group it is, they are paying attention to all of them like evenly. But one of the conversations we've had is like, when we go back to the real world, how are you going to make sure that everybody has the same equality of presentation that you do in Zoom, where everybody's box is the same size, right?
Yes, I love that. How do we make your box the same size?
Yeah.
We're gonna make that a show. I think that's the title.
Okay.
We're gonna tell everybody this is how we make decisions on coffee time. Out of our heads. All right, we are out of time. But Peter, I just we could talk about these things forever. And, what we hope to do with this show is really begin the conversation or help you have a conversation starter. Take it back to your team. Explore, create safe space, but also explore and examine your practices. And then make the commitment to change.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. In the spirit of continuous improvement, right?
Yes.
You're not going to change once and be done.
Yes. And we are not done with this conversation. So join us next Friday at 10:30 on Coffee Time with Masterminds.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye.